and encouraging and loving place and learn all kinds of badass things about drumming, then tell them that they can join. Here's another thing. If you have a kiddo that is a female drummer and they don't have a Facebook account already, but you do, then please feel free to join for them, and you can post their videos and they can watch our videos. And I promise you that we keep everything very PG or G rated, because I don't want them to see or experience anything that you wouldn't want them to see or experience. So we're very village concept. We very much protect everyone in the group no matter what. So I will shut it down so fast if I see something that's inappropriate, but fortunately everybody has that mindset, so I don't have to work very hard. Everybody's just very encouraging. And we hear that literally every day. I get messages of people saying, I wouldn't even be on Facebook if it wasn't for this group, but I always feel better because of this group. So I just wanted to invite you to come be part of it if you want to be part of it, because you're very welcome. So, okay, so let's move on. So Cindy asked me to teach a little class on how to play smooth. So when people watch my videos, one of the things that I hear a lot is you play very smooth. And I tried to break down kind of what does that mean to people. And so I think when I watch new drummers, their movements are kind of jerky. Do you know what I mean? Like they are kind of, they're not sure about what to do next. So it's kind of, they're not anticipating the next notes. They're not quite sure, so it kind of staggers a little bit. So somebody that plays smooth, it's almost ballet. You know, you're looking at their hands. It's like this. It's very smooth, and you don't have to kind of worry about what are they going to do next. It's kind of crazy. It just sounds. It all kind of should flow together. And one of the things that I think is important is a lot of times you'll hear drummers do a groove, and then when they try to come up with a fill, it doesn't match the song. And so it's separate. All of a sudden, you're not in that cool place in your head with the music. You're all of a sudden, oh, wow, that wasn't quite right. So everything should feel very congruent. The fill should feel like the rest of the song. It should feel like the groove. It should all kind of flow together. And so when you're moving back and forth through all of that, it shouldn't feel like a very different thing, very different concept than the regular groove. I came up with a little idea of that the other day for one of my students, and I threw it up on Facebook. I'm trying to remember it. I think it was just let me think how it was. It was like a little funky thing. So it all should kind of just like, it should all just kind of flow together. It shouldn't all feel weird apart from each other. Because a lot of people are so excited that they learn a drum fill, but they only have a couple of skills, so they throw that into every song, and it doesn't match the song. So it should all kind of match together. Okay, so I've made some notes so that I cover everything. One of the things, and I know that we have some brand new drummers, so let's just talk about, Sharon covered it a little bit about where to hold the sticks, and the fulcrum is so important. I used to watch old videos of myself, and I was holding on way down here. I liked the feel of, well, for one thing, I have Winnie dog arms, right? So I have this much of a wingspan, which is not much. So one of the reasons I was using sticks like that is so I could reach everything. But that doesn't give you what you need. So I always tell people I have about this much sticking out of the back. And that way, it can really move in my hand. Another thing, like she was talking to, was about your grip. Again, watching my old videos, I would notice my pinky would come off of my stick, and I was getting calluses on my finger right here. The reason is because my technique was bad. I was holding on like a death grip right here to make all of those doubles that I do around the kit happen, instead of having a loose grip, which is better technique, and keeping my fingers on the sticks and letting my fingers do some of the hard work instead of everything balancing from right here. So I had to, at 50, go back and learn better technique because I had never been taught, so I didn't know. But when you're doing really good technique, you really shouldn't have a lot of injuries from your playing. So I had to go back and fix those things, and it's not easy to touch an old dog new tricks, but you can do it. And now I'm playing with better technique, and it does look smoother because I can get the stick to move the way I want to because my fingers and my wrists are working together and not just this point. Okay, so that's one of the things. Another thing is Sharon also talked about grip, where there's two main grips. You know, you've got your matched grip, where it should look like this if you're sitting at your drum set. So people always ask me, how high up does the snare go, or how much should my elbows be back, or that your elbows should not be back. And if you're sitting so close to everything that you have to pull your elbows back to get to where you need to go, you need to adjust the setup. So your snare should be in front of you, your elbows, your arms should come down like this, but then everything should go out in front and they should meet kind of here. So it should be look like this. Also, when I set up a kit, I set it up so that when I reach my stick out, naturally it's going to hit about the middle of the head. If it's hitting way up here or if it's hitting way down here, I need to adjust it so that the natural movements don't make me do this, right? Because I see some drummers doing that and they're having to pull in here, or their drum is so tight it's up against their leg, and then they have to do some weird things to kind of hit it, whereas here I don't have to worry because it's just like right where it's supposed to be. So that's one thing. Another thing, people are asking me how to get that finger technique. And Sharon talked about Emmanuel Caplet, which I've heard her talk a lot about turning it over and doing this. But I just saw a video from Drumeo. What is that guy's name? Ragnov or I can't remember. He's like 15 years old and he's like a master player. Yeah, there we go. So he was talking about the claw technique, which, have you heard of that, Sharon? Have you ever seen that? No. Okay. So what he basically did was you take your normal grip, right? Then take your top two fingers, which is probably doing most of the work for most of us, take them off the stick. Both hands. I can't even do, I have arthritis, so I can't hardly even do it on my left. But he said, and then play like normal. So that's very difficult to keep the sticks in your hands and have any kind of control on the sticks because these are usually very weak. These are usually very strong. So he said one of the things to do is to practice like that, which I can't, like I said, I can't even hardly hold the sticks like that. But as you're doing that, then, and practicing like that, when you go back to play normally, your fingers will naturally hold onto the stick. Todd Zuckerman, he's the drummer for Sticks. I was taking a master class from him one time, and he said, you should be able to come up to my hand and pull it right out. You should not have a death grip on your drumsticks. It should be nice and loose so it can move around just like your cymbals, nice and loose. And then it can get all the rebound and things that you want it to get from. You'd be able to do singles, doubles, whatever. And you cannot do that if your fingers are off the stick completely or they're tight gripped. So you have to have a really nice, easy, smooth grip, and that's another way that you're going to play smoother too, is because of the way you're holding your sticks. You don't have to do any kind of weird thing with your body. Everything can work together. Okay, does that make sense?
Like my sticks go flying all the time.
Okay.
So how do you make sure that it's loose but you don't lose your sticks?
And that's a really good question. I'm sorry. She asked, how do you make sure that they're loose, but not so loose that you lose your sticks? And that happens to a lot of people. Some people play with tape. I have Cooper groove sticks. They're here somewhere that have actually grooves in them. Yeah, so I like those because I have lupus and I have a lot of nerve and muscle and arthritis things. So it actually kind of reminds my brain that there's something there that's going to catch. So I don't have to I don't have to grip so hard, and I can keep my grip nice and loose. Another thing, here, let me just pull it out so I can show you guys. Okay, so here's one of them. This has a little bit of a coating on it. It's not like the Zildjian dipped sticks, you know, the brown with the yellow, where if you play with that for very long, you're going to have calluses from just holding it. It's going to have like blisters that you're going to rub. But this is just it just barely gets any kind of sticky at all. I wouldn't even call it sticky, just like there's something that kind of keeps it in your hand. But I really like that because the grooves are all cross around. And it just, it's not uncomfortable at all, but it reminds your hands that it's there, and it just doesn't slip out as much. So I use these a lot. The reason I'm using the Vicks is because this is that thin stick that I was going to use for this room. But yeah. Okay. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, I actually use headhunters, which are grooved.
Oh, okay. Okay, and so that may just be, and I have never watched you play, so I don't know how you're holding your sticks when you play. It's one thing to sit down and you've got your grip on your sticks, but it's another thing while somebody's playing to see if their fingers are staying in contact with the stick.
I'm probably like not. I'm probably like lifting.
And that's likely because so many times we're not using these fingers for anything anyway because we haven't learned that technique, so they just come off the stick. We're letting these fingers do everything. So as you learn to keep them in contact, I bet your stick will stay better in your hand. Does that make sense? Yeah. Did you have any other questions?
Not my end.
Okay. Please feel free to ask questions because I'm very, very happy to stop and answer anything that you want to ask. Okay, then.
Oh, there is a question. I'm sorry.
Go right ahead.
What was the name of those sticks again, Tammy?
Okay. I love these sticks. I've actually been endorsing this stick brand for 4 years. It's called Cooper Groove, COOPERGROOVE, Cooper Groove sticks. And so you can get them with the colored ends, or I have some that are made exactly the same, but they're not dipped, so they're just raw. But you know, with a lot of sticks, they have they're slick on the outside. So if you're using sticks that are not raw, but they're very slick, anytime your hands get wet with sweat, they're going to slide out of your hands. So I never will buy a stick that's slick because of that reason, because I will lose them.
Just another stick that works well for that. Bruce Becker uses them. They're the Vic Firth double glaze or extra double glaze.
Okay.
I started playing with those. They are just a little bit tacky, but not like the Zildjians that blister my fingers.
Okay. And somebody mentioned that he's using the Vic Firth double glaze. Or extra double glaze, and it causes that same effect of it being just a little bit tacky to keep the stick in your hand. It's kind of like that Gorilla Snot. You can use that. Have you seen that? It's a little thing about this big around, and it's got this like kind of tacky green stuff in it. You can put it on your hands, just slightly on your sticks, and it is sticky enough that it'll keep it in your hands if your hands get sweaty. Headhunters is a Canadian brand that she mentioned they're dipped but not. They're grooved and dipped. Okay, so you might want to look at that up, especially if you're here in Canada. Okay, there you go. So in maple, right? Yeah. Okay. Okay, so let me see. Okay, we talked about the relaxed grip. Somebody asked about traditional grip too. That's just this. If you see people playing, you're playing like this. So it kind of started out like you see all of the marching bands, that kind of thing, drum lines. They play like this. If you look at old jazz drummers, Buddy Rich, he would have never changed his grip because to do those fast left-hand rolls that he was doing, you have to have it nice and loose the way jazz drummers play. So that's this grip. It's in between your second and third finger basically, and it just lays kind of right here in this crux of your hand, and that's the traditional grip. And then of course, if you turn it around, match grip. And I tell all my students, when you're playing on the snare or anywhere, match grip is basically the top of your hand is parallel to the ceiling, basically. And there's other grips that, you talk about German grips and French grips and whatever, and you can change it. Some people hold it like when they're using the ride, they will hold their stick like this with their thumb up, kind of pointing that way, and you're letting it bounce in your hand. To get a lot of articulation out of your ride, you can do that. I kind of like to play that way when I'm on the ride, but when I'm back here on toms and things like that, I'm back to the top of my hand up. So, yeah. Some people, when they're doing a lot of singles, they like to have this type of grip. It's like a timpani. When you're doing rolls on a timpani, it's that same kind of concept. And so some people like to do that in in their drum fills and things like that. But Thomas Lang says, always this, no matter what you're doing. He plays with a lot of power, and that works for him. But for some people, mixing it up works. So I'm not going to say that there's one perfect way. I'm going to say what works best for you, what technique works best for you is best for you. So, okay. The next thing I wanted to talk about. Okay, so everybody's probably heard about Moeller technique. If you're a beginning student, a lot of people talk about Moeller technique, and it's basically just kind of how you approach the drum. And I've seen people say it's kind of that whipping motion. It's about dynamics. You cannot have dynamics when you play without Moeller technique, really. And so it's kind of like, I've seen people explain it by kind of like your elbow leads. And when it comes up, then you're whipping it back down. Sorry, I'm having to keep this a little bit farther out. You're whipping it back down, and then a lot of people will, like on the hi-hat, I'll show that to you. You tap it down once, and then as it comes up, you can tap it again. So that's how people are getting like really fast, especially on hi-hat technique. Some people are playing, eighths, but if you want to do I'm making one hit, like this, but I'm getting two sounds. So what I'm doing is, how I like to play it, and a lot of people do it different. They do it all tip on the hi-hat. I tend to play with the shoulder of the stick on the edge of the hi-hat, and then when it comes off, I catch the tip. So the pulse is 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3, 4. And it's loose enough in my hand where I'm really getting rebound. Todd Sugarman talks about that a lot, because a lot of Journey songs, he's having to play these fast songs where, just like Sharon talked about, you can't do 1 and 2 and you can't use your hand like that. So it's got to work in wrist and finger area to make that happen. Same when I'm teaching new students. To do, when we're talking about dynamics, if you're talking about an accented note, where when you're playing and it's kind of slower song, I come up here, and when it comes up, I bring it back down with my fingers, like that. So like that, it's coming up, back down. And ghost notes are down here, so right here above. I don't have it very far. So there's got to be a big difference, or you're not going to hear anything musically out of it. So yeah, that's what you'll hear as grace notes or ghost notes. It's the same thing. It's just having that little tap, So if you're doing it. Yeah, so you can have that little ghost notes in there. So the ghost notes just need to be small. The accented notes need to be large. Like if you hear people doing, little fills on the snare, they'll always do dynamic things. It's never, it's rare. It's rare. You're rarely going to use something like that, but a lot of times it's they're just doing like dynamically. They're changing it so that it's interesting, and they're putting little accents and little, lower volume notes, higher volume notes, so that it's kind of interesting. And you're hitting the rim, not all just on the head of the snare, so it kind of has you're putting those accents in there with the catching the rim. A lot of people will ask me, how do you do that? How do you do a rim shot? And it's basically just letting the tip of the stick hit the head at the same time you're catching the rim with the rest of your stick. And so a lot of times if I'm playing larger rooms, not this room, but a larger room, almost every time I hit my snare, I'm going to hit the rim as well, because the sound guy will tell me, I love that I know what it's going to sound like out of your snare. Because if you're doing a snare test and he says, hit your snare, you're doing that for him and he gets the room right. And then when you're all playing, you're hitting the rim every time. He didn't adjust for that. He doesn't know what that's going to sound like. It's going to be very meaty. It's going to sound harsh compared to what he's used to. So when you're doing a sound test, make sure how you hit your drum is how you're going to play your drum. And that's free. Okay. Let's move on. Do you have questions? Anything? You guys, do you have questions? Yeah.
So I guess you called it shoulder tip on the hi-hat.
Yeah.
I like the sound variation it gives, because it's not just flat. Tack, 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 tack.
Mm-hmm.
You can actually feel that groove. When you go to the ride cymbal, is it all beat at that point, or will you move your stick?
Well, let's think. So if I'm playing, there's a song that we do. It's a Gino Vanelli song. I Just Want to Stop.
Well, just repeat the question.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Yeah, he was talking about, he likes that technique of shoulder tip, or you could do it the other way, tip to shoulder, either way, however you want it to sound. But then he said, what happens when you go to the ride? Do you just play it straight then? Or is there a way to do that? Well, of course, we have options because the ride has a bell. So, very different sound. Or you could just change the volume. I almost like a accented ghost, almost, that kind of thing. And I do that. There's a song that we do that's a Steely Dan song a Carly Simon song, You Belong to Me. When you listen to how the drummer was doing the ride, it's very much during part of the song, you can hear the difference. He's not hitting the shoulder like that, but you can hear differences in that. So he's making it very musical just by changing those tiny little details. Then if you're doing with everything else that's going on, you can kind of hear it's that same kind of concept that way. Yeah, does that answer your question? Yeah, okay.
Talking about before the positioning,
Yeah.
and then you're talking about rim shots. My rim shots are like super inconsistent, so I'm wondering if I don't have my drum positioned the right way, like tilt and just like, is there an optimal place to be getting the stick for the rim shot?
Everybody's going to be different, okay? So your body is made different than my body and everybody's body. Oh, sorry. I have to repeat the question. Where's an optimal place to have your snare so that you get a consistent rim shot every time? Should it be straight? Should it be tilted? Should it be closer in? Should it be farther out? Okay, so for me, I was noticing when I was playing gigs, I had my snare so low, I liked playing it low, that when I would do a really nice hit on the snare, my fingers could actually touch the top of my leg. And after a 4-hour gig, that gets old real quick. And Todd Zuckerman was watching me play one time, and he said he keeps his snare almost to his button on his jeans, like the top of the snare. And then he also has his floor tom about the same place. And that way, when I'm doing songs where you have a cross stick, A lot of people that have their snare real low, they're having to do this, right? I don't want to play a gig like that. So this is right here, and then the same thing. It's very consistent because it's just right here. It's exactly where my hands would normally land. So making sure that your snare, and I keep my snare basically flat, so I don't have to tilt it a certain way. I know a lot of jazz players will kind of tilt it this way, and then they can catch that snare if they're playing, especially in this grip. That's easy for them, and I can understand that, but because we're playing match grip, it makes more sense for it to be more flat, and that way we can catch the rim easily. Yeah? Yeah, okay. Did you have any questions? No questions. All right, moving on. All right. Let me open this. Sorry, just logged out. Okay. Okay, we talked about, Sharon talked about some amazing ideas for fills. And I have to second what she was talking about, singing the fill. Because even when I'm thinking of a really cool fill to do, I will sing it first in my head, you know. And then, and with my students, I will teach them a fill, brand new students, I'll teach them a little fill to add to their little basic rock groove, right? And then they get so messed up, they can't figure out how to do it. And I'm like, just sing it back to me. I'll sing it to you, you sing it to me. And then and that starts it because your brain is already ready to do that fill. But it's going to take some time to make that brain-body connection. You have to literally make new neural pathways in your brain to do the kinds of things that we're doing. You know, gymnasts don't do all of those cool things in the Olympics the first time they learn how to do it. They have to make all of those muscle connections, brain-body connections, all of that. So I tell my students all the time, it's like learning how to play fills and grooves and coming back on one all the time. It's kind of like taking driver's ed, right? You're scared. You don't want to be out on the open highway and all of these things. But eventually you'll get my age and you drive to the store. You don't remember how you even got there because you don't think it anymore. You're on autopilot, right? And the same thing with drums. I don't think about how to do my doubles anymore. I don't think about, Sharon doesn't think about right, left, kick, or whatever it is. Those are just natural, but she's done them so many times and she's made those connections in her body and her kit that she doesn't have to consciously think, check my window, check this, check whatever. She's just doing it now because it's a natural process for her body. But yeah, so remember, if you're getting frustrated with all of these things, you're in driver's head. You're in driver's head. You're not driving the bus anymore. You're just learning all these new things. But I promise you, you'll be on the open road soon, and you won't have to think about all these little details. Then you'll be able to put all the nuances on your music that makes it sound really cool. Because somebody that is fairly new and now they can play a full song, they can even put a couple little fills in there, but they don't have dynamics. Well, if they just play everything the exact same volume, the same way, it's not going to be very musically interesting to the audience. But if somebody has dynamics in their playing, and they have some little accents and they have some little kind of nuances, and then you have the freedom because you've increased your skill set, you can do all these kind of cool little things, then you don't have to worry about it too much. You have this huge toolbox that you can draw from. If somebody throws a new song on you and you're like, okay, I can figure that out, because you have enough tools. You know, it's not so hard anymore. But you were talking about, I was thinking about your question before, playing across a bar, the fill across a bar. And that song, let's go back to my favorite song right now. That song does that because they have a fill that he's doing is like, okay, so the song is going, da, 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 right? And then he goes, so he's kind of accenting where the horns are accenting too, but it's probably on like the and of one or the and of two. I haven't counted it out, but he's playing past the bar and then he's doing that. But a lot of times you were asking, where do you know where to put it, or where do you know where to come off of that? And a lot of times it's where there's an accent in that next measure. So he's matching the horn part. Dun, da, 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 dun, da, da, da. Then here's a fill, and then the next measure is bah, dun, da. So he's playing across that and into that to accent that part. So he's just ignoring the bar line, keeping the fill going, and then hitting that, and then coming back. So it really sounds cool because he's matching what the horns are accenting and probably the keyboards as well. And it just sounds just very groovy when you can do that. So there has to be a reason for it. Like Sharon was talking about, you just don't throw it in just because you can do it. But in this instance, when he's doing that, it makes total sense to the song because then it accents what they're already doing. Does that make sense?
Yes, and I think Alabama Shakes has a song that does that. It spans over the bar line, but then it's coming back with the accents and the.
Exactly. So it makes total sense to the song. Like I was talking before, when you are kind of playing smooth, that's part of being smooth is you're playing to the song. So just because I have the skills to do whatever doesn't mean I can just throw it in whenever I want to. It has to accent the song. It has to make the song sound better if I'm going to do it. That makes sense? Yeah, because that's the whole goal. You want the song to sound better. I want to play in a way that's going to make my singer sound better. And if I'm just wailing, my singer can't sound better because I'm covering over any cool thing that she's doing, or my bass player. If I'm being so busy on my bass foot that my bass player can't move around, he has to keep it straight because I'm hogging it all, right? So if I see that he's getting a little busier, I'm back on 1 and 3 a lot of times so that he can have room to move around a little bit. So.
I don't know, like a question in terms of dynamics for who's playing. If you've got, a saxophone player or something, and it's a solo, often they'll go to the right, but then if it's like a standing bass or even sort of a quieter piano, do you then go back to hi-hat or like because often you hear that the rule of thumb is during the solos you're on the ride, but I find like sometimes it's too quiet, and so then the ride is too dominating. Or do you just play it softer on the ride?
That's a really good question. So here's the question. When someone in the band is playing a solo, like a guitarist or a bass player or whatever, where would I play on my kit, on the hi-hat or on my ride, to not cover over what they're doing? So my band does a lot of improv things, and I can tell you exactly what I do. A lot of times when it's my guitarist playing a solo, I will be on the ride because that just makes sense. There's a little washiness underneath it, and it's a little more high end, higher pitch, whatever. I like that just to kind of match what he's doing. But then when my bass player is playing a solo, the volume is so less compared to a guitar player or even a keyboard player that I have to come back to my hats, and I keep it real small. And I keep the drum beat, even if it was pretty busy otherwise for other instruments, I keep it very basic with my bass player so that he can move around and we're not bumping into each other, and it shows him off a little bit. So I just keep it very basic and very quiet on my hi-hat. So to keep it quiet, I would more use the tip of my stick on the top instead of here. That's going to be a lot of meatier sound. Of course, I'm not going to have my hi-hat open at all because that even makes it louder because the cymbals then clang together and they make a lot of noise. So yeah, that's what I would do. I bring my volume way down when somebody's doing a solo, unless my guitar player is doing a solo and it is just like he's ripping through it. We do a song, Long Train Running from the Doobie Brothers, and he just like kills it. And he probably does 2 or 3 loops of solo, and we're actually building through those solos until his 3rd loop is really big. So I'm starting out here And then as it gets really big, I'm up here, and then eventually I'm on the shoulder. So I'm really accenting some of the things that he's doing. So I'm building when he's building, if that makes sense. Yeah.
There's a good comment here that echoes a lot of what you've been saying, Tammy. My dear mentor, Jerry Granelli, always said we should try to serve the music, and sometimes that means not playing, leaving space.
Okay, that's such a perfect comment too, because some people watch videos from, like, say, Chris Coleman and Aaron Spears. They're incredible drummers, and they can play all these singles and all these incredible fills, right? But they don't always do that. And the thing that people fall into when they're learning how to play and they're following these, they're the gods of drumming, right? They try to fill every note. And what's funky about drumming is the space is as important or more important than the notes. So knowing where to leave the space when you're doing a fill, or even when you're doing a groove. Not every groove is going to be. It might be. That might serve the song better. So that little amount of space might make that have a better feel. So you really have to kind of look hard into how if this is going on the whole time, especially if your volume is up, that's annoying. It's not musical. But if you're doing something really kind of interesting, like that Wishing Well song, that's kind of interesting. So the drummer that came up with that, I really like that, because he could have just kept it, it sounds like. He could have done that, but the fact that he just little tiny difference made that so cool. It made it an iconic drum beat. Everybody knows the hook of that song because of that little thing that he added. So those are the kinds of things when you're looking to play with some nuances in your playing. That's what you need to be looking at. What can I add, or what can I take away, even more important sometimes, to make it sound really good. Does that answer, you think? Did you guys have other questions about that or anything else so far?
Here's another comment
Sure.
from Claire. I love to write parts where the drums drop out for a phrase during a song. It really adds dynamics and a cool dramatic pause.
So much. And a lot of, even tonight, a lot of what we're doing, I was just writing myself a few little notes. I'm playing 7 songs, Sharon's playing 6, I think. And I just put the set list and just like maybe 2 or 3 words of each song of what I need to remember. And over, I was writing, guitar brings it in 3 measures, and then the drums are on 4-anda or something. So just in the intros, when we call it staggering in or building in or something like that, my band does that a lot, where maybe my keyboard player will play a little something, then the bass player comes in, then I will come in, and then the guitarist takes off. And so just like that little stagger stuff, and then same thing if we're kind of de-escalating the song a little bit, and everybody kind of starts to take away some of the busyness of their parts, and then it sounds so cool to be able to do that. But again, that's trying to think musically and not just, I'm dying to play. Just like, how is it going to make everything sound the best together? You have to kind of approach it that way.
I like how you said to me yesterday, it's one voice.
It's one voice. It should be one sound. So if you're listening to a band and they like that Jill Scott song, which I love so much, I should be getting a sponsorship from this band. Because I want you, please go on and listen to that one on Facebook. On YouTube. Because if you listen to it, they are so incredibly tight and in tune with each other. Even the nuances as far as volume and those little fills that the drummer does. He's a phenomenal drummer, but he puts them where they need to be and not where they don't. Because he could do anything he wants, but he's making it so that everything, like when she's kind of bringing it down and her voice is kind of down, he is barely tapping the cymbals. Cindy talked to me about like that last night when I was just hitting the cymbals and you could just barely hear a wash. That's what you need there, because her voice is down, the instruments are down. You don't have to hit hard to get some volume. There's overhead mics. I don't need to hit hard. So you just barely need to have that little touch, and it just sounds so good when somebody does that and pays attention to those little things. Yeah? Okay. Okay, so here's another thing. People often talk to me about why I add doubles into my fills so much. And honestly, here's the short answer: because I didn't know any different when I was learning how to play, and I taught myself. So I would hear a lot of drummers do fills, and they would be, doing all these kind of notes, and it was all singles. But my singles weren't fast, and my hands just weren't going that fast. But doubles seemed easy to me. So I would do a lot of, so like doubles, fills in an easy way for me. And I can add it, like Sharon was talking about that pattern. You can just add those little I like that because I can keep it really, really empty, or I can add just some little thing. It can just be just a little drag into it, but it kind of has a cool feel to it. So that's why I do that, and people are asking me which roll I'm using, and it's basically what Sharon was saying, that 5. Yeah, she talked about that too. I actually have my students do that. Floor tom is going to be harder because it's usually very loose, and you're not going to get a lot of rebound out of your floor tom. So you have to use your fingers. That's why this technique is so important. Okay, so just to go back on the Moeller technique, I'm gonna have to push this out just a little bit. So it's basically like that motion. So you're kind of whipping it. So my elbow's coming out a little bit. It's coming up. So sorry that's loud, but it's kind of that motion. So when you're playing, it kind of looks like that all over the drums. It's just very smooth, right? Because I see rock drummers are going to look a little bit different. They're more this, right? They're playing a lot of singles, and it's going to look like this. But if you see jazz drummers or kind of funk drummers or people that are playing really groovy looking stuff, if they're pretty salty drummers, you're going to see more of this kind of movement, right? Because they're having to use dynamics, and in doing that, they're having to use Moeller technique. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. We have 15 minutes. If you guys have other questions, I'm really happy to answer anything. Cindy, do you have anything?
No, just some comments. And actually, we can open it up after you're done, too, to you and Sharon, right?
Sure.
Till 4:30 if you want, for people to have questions.
Absolutely.
No, keep going. Yeah, sure.
Okay, let me see if I covered everything. Okay. I've talked about this kind of all day, but let me just go back over. If you are a fairly new drummer, but you're in a band, because a lot of people are in that situation, and they haven't been on stage a lot, so they don't know what to expect. So as much as it's important to sound like one unit going out, you really have to lock in with your band. As far as I'm a very visual person, so when I show up. I have practice and practice and practice. I've memorized the set. I'm not watching a chart. And that way I am free to watch my musicians on the stage because I'm behind them generally. So if my keyboardist is kind of going crazy on this pattern and he wants me to follow along, I can hit those accents with him because I'm watching him from behind. My bass player is always here. So I can see his hand up here. I can watch what he's doing, and so if I'm seeing him doing some really cool things, I try to match some of that. Yeah, and then my singer, there's a singer that I play with. God love her. She has an amazing voice, but she cannot figure out how to come in Like if we're doing some kind of musical interlude and it's her turn to come back in, she just doesn't hear it. And a lot of people just automatically, they know where that's supposed to be, but she just doesn't hear it. So we have to set that up for her so she knows exactly where that is. So just knowing those little nuances about your band and kind of driving the train is what I call it. You know, you have to make sure that not only are you playing with the correct dynamics, you know your music well, but you're keeping the tempo correct. One thing I did bring it, but I don't have it with me right now. There's a product called Soundbrenner. I don't know if you've heard of that. It's kind of looks like a big Apple Watch, basically. But it's basically a metronome that buzzes, like it pulsates on your wrist. So I'm already wearing in-ears with the mix of the band, so I can't really have a click in. Not that I like to play with that anyway, but this I can put it on my wrist or my legs or wherever, and it's going to pulse, so I can feel that. And some people, it's a problem because as you play with your sticks, of course, you're going to get that feeling of, hitting, and that's already going to kind of buzz your hands. So some people like to have it up here, or they like to have it on their thigh or around their ankle. They can feel it. You have to kind of train your body to feel for that. But if you're doing a long set, you can set up a playlist on it. You can, and then it'll just go through your playlist as you hit it. So that's a help. If people don't like to have all of that sound of the band plus a click and try to manage that, this is an option to make sure that you stay right on.
The drummer is counting in, right? Like if a singer is counting in or someone else, how would you make
Yeah, it wouldn't. So in the bands where I use that, I click in everything, or on that particular song, I don't use it. So there's a couple of songs that my keyboard brings in, and I just let him set the pulse, and then we follow that. But on other ones where maybe there's a drum lead in or something like that, I will click it, and then I know where the pulse is. That helps just to make sure that we stay pretty steady. Yeah. Any other questions? I don't want to. I feel like I'm answering all the questions on this side of the room. Do you guys have anything to say or comments? Everybody's like, hands up. Okay, let me make sure that I covered everything that I wanted to cover. I think I did, basically. The only other thing is, and I think I mentioned this a little bit earlier, is playing to the room. So I've actually done a gig one time. Oh my gosh, we played at this restaurant, and I am not kidding you. We had a space that was less than the size of this carpet for the entire band. Like, my bass player's bass was nearly hitting me in the head. And so, of course, all of the tables, the restaurants, they were like on top of us. They were right here. So, of course, what I'm going to do, use my lightest sticks. I'm never going to like really hit my cymbals hard. I'm barely just going to let them wash. I'm going to give them, just like barely anything, because that's all they need. They don't need anything big. But so playing to the room is really important for a drummer, especially because our instrument carries so much. So just be aware of that if you're at a church or you're at a restaurant or a bar or wherever you're playing. Playing to that space is just as important as knowing your music and playing well with your band. All of those things have to be there. Yeah. Anything else? I'm so happy to have gotten to do this. Yeah.
What do you call the sticks that are a bunch of small sticks stuck together? Hot rods?
Oh, I use those constantly. Yeah.
For a room that's smaller?
Here's the question. I don't think I brought mine because I knew I wasn't going to use them. The hot rods, which are basically like bamboo shoots, bamboo bundles, and they're taped together at the bottom. And so a lot of drummers use those in quieter spaces or at church or wherever. And I use those a lot, actually. And even if we're not in a tiny room, sometimes on some songs, I like the effect that it has on the drums. So And normally in my gig bag, my stick bag, I have a huge stick bag. I have mallets. I have every kind of size of drumsticks. And also, I take this with me to every gig. I just, I hook it up to my hi-hat, and I can have 2 or 3 sizes and types of heads of the sticks, because depending on the song, I like the feel of this kind of stick, say on kind of jazzy songs. But if there's a song with a lot of snares or a lot of toms or a lot of something like that, I might want a round head, because that's what they use, in drumline. They're going to use a round head more, because it just rolls really easily and all of that. Or a thicker stick if I'm doing a lot of like tom stuff, because it's just going to have a little more punch to it. And if I want to keep everything really, really light, I'm going to use a tapered head and a really thin stick, not a nylon tip, because that's going to be much more harsh. A wooden tip is going to be much more soft on a cymbal than a nylon tip. Although the wooden tips, as you know, chip. Nylon tips don't tend to, and so for some reason, for that reason, people like to use those. But yeah, so I always have a full choice of sticks and different types of things. The hot rods go with me. I have sticks that are a stick on one end and a mallet on the other end, so I can just flip while I play. Do cymbal swells that are not harsh, because if you're in a church setting or a small thing, and you're trying to do like start from nothing to a cymbal swell, when you first start, you're going to hear a clang, right? You don't want that, but if you've got a mallet, it's very much like this. So it's never harsh when you're trying to start from zero and kind of build it up. So that's what I use that a lot. I always have choices, and if you see me play even an hour gig, I might switch sticks 3 or 4 times, because of it's a different part of my toolbox. I use these for a reason. I use those for a reason. Hot rod versus what? Oh, brushes. I've never used brushes except when I played jazz. So for any gig that I'm playing, brushes don't make sense, because they're not going to be loud enough for anything that I'm doing. But hot rods really work well. Yeah, and they have a different sound on this snare too. I really like the way they sound, especially if I'm doing like crossover country things. It just sounds good, especially if you're doing that, they call it the train beat. Or, that's harsh, but if you've got those hot rods, it's just like a. I really like that. It sounds really good. So yeah, have a lot of different things at your disposal when you're playing, because you might like the way that sounds compared to this.
The hot rods also, I find, enhance the phase of the cymbals.
Yeah.
Playing them, you can really hear the shimmer sounding different.
Yeah, mentioned was somebody here likes the way that the hot rods sound on the cymbals, and that's true, because if you're starting from zero or you're a very quiet part of the song, you don't want that harsh articulation or different things, but the hot rods are very light on the cymbals. You can still hear it. You can even go up on the bell and make it a little louder, but it's not going to be harsh or cutting. It will blend a lot better if that's what you're wanting, and that's what you should be wanting. Blending is always good. Yeah. Okay, well, I think that's it, unless somebody has questions for me.
Yeah, well, we have time. Any questions for Sharon or Tammy? Anything you want to refresh her on for today? Other questions? Okay. Well, everyone, come back tonight, 7 p.m. We have an amazing show.
Yes.
Tammy and Sharon are going to be the guest drummers with Giles. I think she's fantastic.
She's
I think you'll
phenomenal.
yeah, we all agree.
Yeah.
So we will see you in a few hours. Thanks so much for joining us.
Can I mention one thing?
Sure.
If you have questions after the fact and you're part of DGU, you can just contact me through there, or you can go to my email. It's tammywoodsdrums@gmail.com. Send me any questions. I'm happy to answer.
Terrific. And there's one final question. What ear protection are people using?
Okay. I don't know what Sharon uses, but for me, I have never bought the molded $800 ears. I just I lose stuff too much, so I'm not going to spend that. If I was on tour, I would definitely do it. But for me, I'm just using. I get these off of Amazon. I think I spent like $80 or something, and I have probably 4 pair of them because, like I said, I break stuff, I lose stuff. So yeah, I just get the in-ears that wrap around my ears so they don't come out while I'm playing. And I usually have different sizes of all of this, so they fit really well. I just keep them in always, though, even when I'm playing just by myself and not even to music. I always have something protecting my ears. What about you, Sharon?
I use the custom ultimate ears.
Okay.
And yeah, I've used them for years, like since I was 16. Oh, do you want me to?
Do you want to come here?
Oh,
I personally use the custom ultimate ears in ears. Like I've just used them since I was 16, so that's like 13 years now. So I've just kind of gotten used to using them. But I also, as of recent, also use the Drumeo in ears too because they fit really nice as well. And like I find even though they're not custom molded, they still fit like really well inside. So I really like them too.
On DGU, there was a discussion around this, but not for in-ears, but just for regular, and that's where I learned about vibes, which are like $20.
vibes.
Vibes, but they are they reduce the sound but don't change the tone, and it's so much more comfortable than like regular.
Okay, so somebody mentioned,
Discussion on DGU about it.
okay, somebody mentioned a company called Vibes that has in-ears that work really well.
They're not in-ears, they're not, they don't have sound.
Okay, so they're basically earplugs.
Yes, but they don't distort the sound.
Okay, so they don't distort the sound, but they protect your ears. There you go. Perfect. Awesome. Well, thank you. Thank you guys for having us. I
Thank
hope
you
you had
so
fun.
much, and a big thanks to our person here. We have someone named Ramo who's helped us with all the live streaming today and the videography and the filming.
Yes.
So I'll be sure to get video online for all of you soon. Thanks again, and we'll see you online at 7 p.m.
Yes.